Emil, Amok to you. Welcome to our secret podcast. You found us. I know you're saying, this is your secret podcast? Yeah, you found us. Emil, Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live, sometimes recorded, but we're here because there's stuff going on that you got to ask yourself, WDAAAT, what does an Asian American think? I'll tell you. Wow, hope you had a good weekend. Thank you for joining us. Like they say in the airlines, right? You have choices. I'm glad that you are at least making a choice to listen to this recorded, or maybe you just bumped into this. You can find us, of course, on YouTube at Emil Amok1, my YouTube channel, or on Twitter, now known as X. Or shall we continue to go on Twitter now that Alex Jones is back on there? But at Emil Amok, EMILAMOK on Twitter. We're on Facebook at fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. And you can catch some back issues on amok.com. But this is episode 622 for the 12/11/2023. It's a Monday in December, and we trudge on because, we just are happy that we have another day to honor, another day where we're blessed. Good or bad, we take it. It's what's in front of us. And today I want to talk about the right's anti-diversity ploy. I wrote a column for diverse issues in higher education. If you haven't seen it, it's there on their blog, on their website. And I'll get into it. I'll read it to you. But it's my sentiments about the whole college presidents controversy. Then I want to talk about Shohei Ohtani. Shohei, no Seihei. Seihei would be the catchphrase of Willie Mays, the great San Francisco Giants legend, the greatest player in all of baseball, right up there with Babe Ruth, maybe even better than Ruth. Although Ruth was a pitcher for a little while, then a hitter, home run hitter. Willie was everything. A five-tool player, they called him. And Shohei Ohtani is now considered the best player ever. And, of course, on Friday, we were expecting him to make an announcement that he was going to join a team. He was going to leave the Los Angeles Angels. And we thought, maybe there's a chance he would join the San Francisco Giants, my favorite team, the team of Willie Mays. But no, Shohei joined the Dodgers, the arch rival of the Giants forever, right? Ever since Brooklyn and then now to California, where San Francisco and LA. I have this irrational hate. I call it hate because it is. It's an irrational hate for Los Angeles because of the Giants and Dodgers. More so than the 49ers, Rams, more so than the Warriors, Lakers. It's Giants, Dodgers, and now they've got Shohei. I'll talk about that today. Also talk about Stephen Smith and his first reaction to Shohei Ohtani a couple of years ago, where he actually, sometimes guys like Stephen A. Smith, he makes $14 million or so at ESPN, and he deserves to be called out again and again because when he first saw Shohei Ohtani, he said, how dare Major League Baseball, put out Shohei Ohtani as, their marquee player. He doesn't even speak English. That's what he said. We called him out as Asian American journalists. What happened to Stephen A. Smith? Nothing. I said maybe this is an Al Campanis moment for Stephen A. Smith. Al Campanis, the Dodger exec, who said some salaciously racist things offhandedly about black athletes, he lost his job, Al Campanis. Stephen A. Smith, the $14 million man at ESPN, nothing. For making really racist observations about Shohei Ohtani being the front person for baseball. This was a few years ago. I wrote about it on the Aldef blog. Look, Google it. Emil, Guillermo, Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. didn't exactly grovel. He brought in people from ESPN who are Asian to like kiss his ring and say, "Oh, you're okay, Stephen." But now here it is 3 years later, and Shohei Ohtani is the toast of baseball, the greatest player possibly to ever play the game, making $700 million. I'll talk about that a little later. Then I want to say something about Ryan O'Neal. I don't want to let the passing of Ryan O'Neal go, because Ryan O'Neal, besides giving us Tatum O'Neal, who in her day was okay. I mean, Paper Moon, okay. No Tatum O'Neal fans out there? But Ryan O'Neal was a kind of iconic figure in American culture. He wasn't Taylor Swift, but, for the white male, he had a nice career, embattled career. I mean, he had his demons, but he was with Farrah Fawcett. He had movies with Barbara Streisand. He was a figure. And the movie that put him on the map pretty much was Love Story. And I've got a relationship with Love Story, which means I have a relationship with Ryan O'Neal, which is why I'll talk about it in a bit today. So welcome to Emil, Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We'll get to things. This is my micro talk show of the AAPI, and the AAX is the Asian American Film and the X. And it's, this is subtitled WDAAT. What does an Asian American think, as they rarely ask? So here we are. You can find out what an Asian American thinks, a Filipino American. First of all, I said I was going to turn to this, and I'm going to turn to it first because I just heard about it. Apparently, it was first published on the 9th. I just saw it in my paper in the New York Times today. And that is the obituary of Maria Emilia Martin, the creator of Public Radio's Latino USA. She dies at age 72. And I saw that headline and I said, Maria Emilia Martin. She never told me her middle name was Amelia. This is the thing about people of color who worked their way up in the media when the media was all white. We're comrades in arms. We're fellow warriors. And when I was at NPR, Maria was there. I just knew her as Maria Martin. She'd come on the show sometimes when I was the host of All Things Considered. She'd talk about Latino stories. And then she would go off. She was forming Latino USA. They were in Texas, I believe, I think in Austin. And but whenever she was in DC, she was always one of my kindred spirits, one of my friends. And there were times when we would wouldn't see each other for a long time. Then I'd see her, and I remember one time she invited me to a party around Day of the Dead, the cultural expression about mortality. I mean, if you're Catholic and you're Filipino, you have a similar sort of thing. Comes out of Halloween. But I remember going to a couple of those Day of the Dead parties that she had when she was living in Washington, D.C. So when I saw the headline, I just thought, God, I haven't talked to Maria in years. And there's always the hope that, you will meet your friends somewhere along the line, especially in media. You'll see them. And I always thought that, okay, of the handful of people that I considered friends from NPR, of course, they were the people of color, African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, a handful of, mainstream Caucasian Americans. Relatively few, though. And so when I saw the headline, Maria Amelia Martin, creator of public radio's Latino USA, dies at 72, I just had to pause. Subtitle: As a radio journalist committed to the goal of representing all voices, she fought to tell the stories of Latino communities in the Americas. And that really is how we all felt. We were there not just to represent, not just to be there as a Latino or as an Asian or as a Filipino American. We were there to tell our stories. Because if we didn't, no one else would. This obit was written by Penelope Green. The lead is really something because it just kind of, and the lead's supposed to encapsulate. There's the headline, then there's the lead. The first 2 graphs. Maria Amelia Martin, who founded Latino USA, which is now the longest running public radio show in the country covering Latino communities, and who trained and mentored hundreds of journalists in Central and South America, died on December 2nd at a hospice facility in Austin, Texas. She was 72. The cause was complications of surgery, said the NPR arts correspondent Mandalit Del Barco, a protege of Ms. Martin's, and also one of the handful of friends from my NPR years, from the late 80s and 90s, who, if I were to walk down the street and say, Mandalit, I think that's how I greeted her 15 years ago when I last saw her. 10, 15 years ago. When she was roaming the country with a little video camera, getting sound and video, and just Mandalit Del Barco, a protege of Maria's. Ms. Martin had not been planning on a career as a journalist. Like many of her peers, she had been inspired by the civil rights movement to think about organizing on behalf of her cultural heritage as a Mexican American. In the early 1970s, when she first heard KBBF, I know KBBF, a Latino-owned and Latino-operated public radio station broadcasting out of Santa Rosa, California, where she was a social worker, she signed on as a volunteer to help produce a weekly talk show devoted to women's issues, including sexuality, birth control, and abortion. She was moved by the show's powerful reach and by the particular impact it had on low-income farm workers, many of them women, who would call from payphones with their questions so that their husbands would not hear them. One night a call came from a woman who had taken an overdose of pills. As Miss Martin recalled in her memoir, Crossing Borders, Building Bridges, A Journalist's Heart in Latin America, 2020, the woman asked for help because no one at the hospital where she was being treated could understand her. The idea that public radio could be not just a community resource, but also a lifeline was, Ms. Martin wrote, an aha moment for her, and she was hooked. She quit her job as social work to work KBBF as news and public affairs director. She later moved to a station in Seattle, and she often worked as a freelancer. She joined NPR in the 1980s. That's when I met her. Became the organization's Latino affairs editor, but she still struggled to get her stories on the air, and she blamed the lack of diversity in management. That's when I was hired in 1989, and I remember I was hired by Adam Powell, who I believe was the first African American to be vice president of news. And I just remember the struggles he had to bring in a diverse staff, because we all know that if there's a diverse staff, not just on the air, but editors and people behind the scenes, you will get coverage. Frustrated, Ms. Martin left to work on a project funded by the Ford Foundation and organized by the Center for Mexican American Studies at the University of Texas, Austin, to create a national Latino-focused radio program. That became Latino USA, with a mission to cover Latin American communities It can now be heard on 386 public radio stations across the U.S. and Canada. When it first aired in May of 1993, Bill Clinton attended its launch party, and that will be Maria's legacy. She was NPR's first and only Latino affairs editor. Maria Martin. You know, such a nice, kind soul. And what gets me is that she was just 72. Just 72. And she was always so kind and generous. And we knew when we saw each other that we could help each other. And while she was there, we did as much as we could, as much as I had the power to. So, like I said, I just found out today, regretfully, I hadn't seen Maria since around the time that I left NPR, sometime in the 90s. And so, like I said, if you're a diversity warrior, if you're in the media, you feel like you're kindred spirits, you're fighting the battle. But now Maria can look down on what she has left behind. She's left behind a legacy. Latino USA survives as a program in almost 400 stations across the country. So farewell to my friend Maria Amelia Martin, creator of Public Radio's Latino USA. She dies at age 72. Wow. It just gets to that stage where you know that people who you're fighting in these battles are still battling. We're still battling these things. And, we have these incremental steps of success, but we're still battling. Still battling for acceptance, still battling for our stories to be heard. But, as I said, at least now she has left a legacy. All right, connected to that, right now, I suppose Harvard, the board of directors, still meeting to decide the fate of Dr. Claudine Gay, who was heralded as being, here is Harvard's first African-American president. It was a moment in Harvard's history that was just ready, because the university is dealing with all these ideas coming up about what Harvard was like in its history, what Harvard did in its past, and how to reconcile those deeds, those actions, not just to African Americans and all the people whose names are associated with buildings and monuments at Harvard who are slaveholders. But I'm talking about Native Americans, Asian Americans, Filipino Americans, the guy who was in charge of education in the Philippines was a Harvard graduate who was connected with Taft and all the people who were governors or who were leading the charge of imperialism in the Philippines in the 1890s. So Harvard has a lot to deal with. And we don't know about all these things unless we have researchers and scholars who go back in the history and say, oh, look at this. Look at this truth that we have uncovered. And so it's ironic that that's the time that we're at right now. But we're also in this other time where with the Israel-Hamas war raging on, we have protests on both sides, pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian. How do we balance all that? right? I mean, that was the question of like Congress had to bring in the three presidents from Harvard, MIT, and UPenn. I mean, the idea is, yeah, something is wrong here. We got to rectify that. And something happened on the way to the hearing. I mean, the hearings were last Tuesday. And since then, it's sunk in that, and if you haven't realized it yet, and I wrote this for diverse issues in higher education, if you haven't realized it yet, those congressional hearings that continue to make news this week because they're meeting about the future or about whether or not Dr. Claudine Gay is going to keep her job. If it hasn't dawned on you yet, those hearings were not about solving anti-Semitism in America. That was the given context for the hearing. But it really served as a platform for an outright attack by right-wing MAGA types on the thing they believe has destroyed higher ed the last 30 years. The last generation, higher ed has been destroyed by what? That would be, of course, diversity, aka diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI type of programs. And with that comes everything else that in these detractors' views have crippled higher ed, and everything from hiring to curriculum, including the emergence of race, gender, and equity studies that have made people more aware of issues heretofore ignored on American campuses and in society in general. What it's done, it's educated a group of scholars and a group of people who are now aware of these things, and they have uncovered truths which are very inconvenient and very damning, and we're trying to reconcile them now. How do you reconcile the fact that a lot of these universities were built on lands that were there were Native Americans, Native American lands that they were pushed out, they were massacred, they're given nothing. The land was taken over, or these people were slaveholders. I mean, that's the reality going back to the 17th century in terms of Harvard. So this is what's going on when the three college presidents came before the congressional committee. And what better way to bring about this attack on higher ed, but in a hearing with three elite university presidents, right? The main instigator, of course, was fourth-ranking Republican Representative Elise Stefanik of New York, who is a Donald Trump acolyte and herself an Ivy League educated Marjorie Taylor Greene wannabe. She went to Harvard. She was taken off the board, I saw a recent report, off the Institute of Politics here for her stand on Donald Trump. In fact, we know Stefanik is a Trump enabler who voted to invalidate the 2020 election. She's maintained the big lie on election fraud. That puts her low on any sane person's credibility scale, but not if you're Donald Trump. At the hearing, Stefanik was in mini authoritarian mode, was given extra time by yielding fellow Republicans so she could wail at the college presidents, demanding they give yes/no answers on complex matters of free speech and discrimination. It was textbook political outrage as performance, and a good example of why politics is sometimes called show business for ugly people. Still, it's hard to believe that elite college presidents who themselves oversee sometimes treacherous academic office politics could have been taken by surprise. Surely they've seen congressional hearings run by the MAGA loyalists like Jim Jordan, a Republican from Ohio. But when Penn's Elizabeth McGill, Harvard's Claudine Gay, and MIT's Sally Kornbluth came to Congress, they just didn't seem to have a clue. They were being teed up by the conservative right. The presidents were bullied, harangued, and then soundbited. It wasn't pretty. And despite more than 5 hours of hearings, most people only saw the micro clips showing the three presidents responding in a collegial, namby-pamby, legalistic way, as if they were in a collegial setting. I mean, they were soft-spoken, reasonable, didn't match the volume, the ire, the fake passion of Stefanik. Now, what they came up with would have been good enough if it were a fair fight. But this was not that. The president failed to understand that hearings don't solve any real problems. Hearings exist for members of Congress to demagogue, beat up on their invited guests, all while the cameras roll, creating viral clips for their own re-election campaigns. Stefanik got what she wanted, news clips on every major network, and over the weekend, a key takeaway wasn't that anti-Semitism was bad or even the main campus problem. Indeed, on one major cable network, the talk was on how the hearings showed why the public has lost faith in higher ed, which has become home of dogmatic ideology and social engineering, not academic merit. And that's the claim. It's far from the truth, but it is the truth if you're of the like mind with Stefanik and other right-wing MAGA types. Now, a fellow committee member, Mark Takeout, Democrat of California, told the Harvard Crimson the Republicans, quote, were not really interested in the topic of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism on campus. Rather, Takeout thought the Republicans were playing divisive MAGA politics. My own sense is that Republicans are spring-loaded to enact a narrative that universities are bastions of liberal progressives, Takeout told the newspaper. They wanted to present an opportunity for their members to portray universities in a certain way. He also was critical of Stefanik, whom he observed as taking a hard turn to the right. But Stefanik's stunt appears to be working. While MIT President Sally Kornbluth has received some support on her campus, Penn's President McGill was forced to resign over the weekend. Harvard's Gay apologized for her soft-spoken performance on Friday, but is still under some pressure to resign. As I said last I checked, the board was meeting to decide her fate. To counter the move to pressure her to resign, faculty members circulated a letter of support on Sunday, and the grounds were Harvard's a private university. It's got tens of billions of dollars in endowment money. It's a private university. It cannot be dictated to by a MAGA hearing. Now, that's bad enough. I mean, that's the ground. Once again, they're sidestepping Semitism, anti-Semitism, the idea that brought them together. But if you think about it, it's an ideal way for the MAGA types to bring up their criticism of diversity. Because here's anti-Semitism. I mean, there's a liberal cause, but you have to balance it out with other people. And this is why they kept saying it's the context. It's what are they saying? Let's look at individual cases. Stefanik tried to make it sound like, we got to look at it in absolute terms. Anti-Semitism is always wrong. Well, it depends on what's said, the context, because they are not for censorship. The university presidents want to make sure that the university is a safe for free expression, free speech, and safety. To balance that, it takes nuance. Some people say, damn with nuance. We don't need nuance in a situation like this. Well, yeah. That's why you don't solve these things in a hearing. That is used for political points. And that's why it was to think that we would come out of this with something positive was really, somewhat naive. But so we have the faculty circulating this letter of support on Sunday. The board is now meeting on Gay's future. Stefanik is still saying she wants every one of those presents gone because she's looking to use this to bring up the culture war of what are these diversity freaks thinking they're doing with our institutions of higher education. There was even some public discussion brought up by one of the billionaires who's pulling his money from Penn, who questioned whether, as an African-American woman, Gay was even qualified for the job. Think, oh, well, this is another situation of diversity, wokeness. It's worked so well. Expect to see more of this anti-diversity, anti-higher ed thing, because the way it's just exploded from the hearing a week ago last Tuesday, it works. I mean, whether or not people really understand it, it works. And for a moment, it brings together some people who you think would not be on the same side, but it brought over some Democrats who just saw the anti-Semitism thing and said, yeah, we're not for anti-Semitism. And so they joined forces with the Republicans. But some people saw through that, thank goodness, like Mark Takano. And so we can expect to see more of this unless we all speak out and unequivocally support the three university presidents and their efforts to fight race hate and promote a real sense of diversity and inclusion on campus, because that's what's at stake. So I don't know what's going to happen to Claudine Gay. She kind of stumbled out of the gate because when she was inaugurated, one of the first things that happened was October 7th. She did not release a statement. She was sort of waiting to see how things were playing out. Student groups came out with statements before, and people attributed that to Harvard, which is not true. It should be attributed to the student group. But people saw it as Harvard speaking, and that's when Gay really got it the first time. And so she already has that one strike. She recovered. She started a plan. And she's about to implement this plan to address anti-Semitism at the school. And then the hearings come up. She's brought in. And instead of really instead of answering in this passionate way, she answered in a very nuanced, very deliberate, very, very academic kind of way. It almost reminded me when, now this is dating me, but it happened during the time when I was up there in Boston. When Governor Dukakis was in a debate and he was asked, what would he do if his wife were raped? And he said some kind of namby-pamby answer, and it just sunk him in the polls. And people said, hey, look, the question was to see if there was any blood curdling in your veins. The question was intended to see if you're a human being and to express that. It wasn't about policy. But Dukakis, the technocrat, who was governor of Massachusetts at the time, running for president, answered in a way that he thought was, this is, kind of even-handed. And people saw that answer, and they didn't want an even-handed answer. They wanted to see Dukakis get enraged. And in that same way, the presidents would have done themselves some good if they said, darn it, Anti-Semitism is so wrong. Anti-Semitism should never be tolerated. I mean, and you, Stefanik, we barely tolerate you, but they should have been passionate. And when Stefanik raised her voice, they should have raised their voice. They didn't. And so that's where we are now. We got the Penn president resigned. The MIT president sort of has a little more support, but there's pressure for her to resign, pressure for Harvard to resign, Claudine Gay. And all it takes is one more billionaire to come in and say, we're going to like withdraw 100 million, which, Harvard can afford it. Now, the way to look at this is not to look at Harvard and say, oh, poor Harvard. But you got to look at this and say, if Harvard can be bullied with its $69 billion endowment, I think that's what it's at, 50, 60 billion. If Harvard can get bullied, what more the small liberal arts college that just believes in free speech and believes in the truth? Do they even have a chance? So this is why this should be closely followed. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was watching a show where they talked about this over the weekend, and they said, "Oh, this is clearly why no one thinks college is worth going to. This is why college has dropped down in its estimation. Why people aren't going to four-year. No, the reason why people aren't going to four-year colleges is because they're not prepared. Because our secondary school system from 9 to 12 is terrible. And that's terrible because our K through 12 is terrible. Our K through 6 is terrible. I mean, it's a domino effect. If your K through 6 is not good, well, go to preschool. All right, fix up preschool. K through 6 still bad. All right, 7 through 9. How good is that? Is your system K through or 7 through 9? And then high school. How good is public high school now? And then you could see, oh, that's why people aren't going to college. They're not going to college because college is bad. They're not going to college because college is irrelevant or because college is so woke and so liberal. They're not prepared to go to college because our K through 12 is lacking. So, but I just had a hard time believing that people were using this college president anti-Semitism hearing as a reason to denounce all of higher ed for what it's done. When in fact, what higher ed has done the last 30 years, because of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's made colleges look like America. It's made faculties and student bodies look like America. It's made the things that people study wake up and understand the truth. I mean, the other day in the New York Times, there was something about how colonization has been rediscovered as a dirty word. Like, wow, suddenly it's being used in political rhetoric like it's never been used. I've been using colonization for years, ever since I found out how the Filipinos were treated as a U.S. colony in 1899, 1902, actually. 1898, they were colonized. 1899, Filipino-American War. 1902, the U.S. took over. But believe me, I've always been sensitive to the term. I knew it was a dirty word. Now people use it all the time. Like, hey, by the way, do you know it's not good to be a colonizer? And I would joke about colonizer and people would like laugh because it was funny. But now it's getting to be like, oh, of course, the colonizers, they're bad. What happened? How did that get that way? It got that way because people learned how to talk about how America screwed over the third world, how America screwed over people in foreign lands, and how other imperial powers did the same. I mean, America wasn't the first to discover this. Oh, there were the British. And there was, the French and Spain, of course, Portugal, Italy, not so much. They had explorers who sailed for Spain. But no, but there were some, there had to be some Italian explorers, or maybe were they just the circumnavigators? And of course, German. Well, we know there's the big guy, the 20th century. Not too big. Had a little mustache. So, people know about this stuff only because they see it in the curriculum, and they study, they learn this, they know how to talk about it. Same thing with gender studies. I mean, can you blame a generation who go through women and gender studies and they're wondering, who am I? What am I? It's just the truth. It's not ideology. But when people are given information, scales fall from their eyes. They see the truth. And it's still true. The truth will set you free if we let it happen. So that's my piece for diversity. The right's anti-diversity ploy. Shohei, I mentioned Shohei. I'm really upset that Shohei is no Seihei. Seihei would be Willie Mays. Willie Mays was a giant. The Giants were after Shohei Ohtani. They didn't get. I mean, Shohei Ohtani's making $700 million over 10 years. $70 million a year, which is the largest contract ever in baseball history. And you think about that and you just shake your head and say, what the? Shohei Ohtani, $700 million. Mike Trout with the Angels, $426 million, $426.5. Mookie Betts with the Dodgers, $365 million. Here's the thing about, you think about Shohei and Mike Trout, the Angels, same team. Did they win a championship? No. So in many ways, all right, you're not going to pay $700 million. You miss out on the greatest generational talent ever. Not the end of the world. It would have been better to have him than not, but just because you spend money doesn't mean you're going to win. But here's why I'm sad that Shohei Ohtani is not with the San Francisco Giants. He would have been the Golden Gate Bridge of baseball. Got to see Shohei. I'm going to San Francisco. We're going to go see Shohei. Instead, what is San Francisco known for now? Because of the right-wing PR out to destroy San Francisco. They go to the slums, the Tenderloin. It's not really the slums. It's just that part of the city where you have poor and you have homeless people gather. And so, they had the APEC summit, or the APEC meetings. And even before then, people were talking about the retail area downtown close to where this area is. And all you hear about San Francisco is it's overrun by the homeless. It's not. I mean, there's one neighborhood maybe, but they're people just like you, in need of a home, and they're not necessarily violent, but there are people who are not well tended for with some mental illness issues, and they need to be taken care of. And that's what exacerbates the situation, because you're talking about some unstable people out there who let go because of the system. So, San Francisco has its issues. If they got Shohei Ohtani, he could have been the biggest thing in San Francisco since the Golden Gate Bridge. The biggest thing since Salesforce Tower. Is Salesforce Tower still a thing? The biggest thing since, you get the idea. People would come to the 82 home games here to see Shohei, even though he's just batting, he won't be pitching. He's a great player. And not just the white fans, but you'll have all the Asians. And California is home to all the Asians. Well, LA is too. They probably have more Asians than San Francisco. These have a bigger population. But it would have been a boon. It would have been great for San Francisco. And it would have evened out what is now like Yankees West in LA. But mind you, they don't win. I mean, they win sometimes, but they don't win all the time. In fact, the Giants beat the Dodgers when the Giants had their run, 2010, 2012, 2014. The Giants beat the Dodgers. But somehow the Giants since 2014 have just gone downhill. And this is going to be, I don't know. I know how the Giants can do it. I hope they sign this other Japanese pitcher. Because if they have the Japanese pitcher, that would solve all the problems. But no, it's a miss. I would have paid Shohei Ohtani whatever he asked for. 700, I would have gone 750. I would have gone 800. It would have been worth it to the Giants. But then, look at the Angels. The Angels didn't win. They had Shohei. At some point, you have to say, not to be. At some point, Shohei's got to say, I want to play for the Giants. They didn't sell him. And one thing I have to say about Shohei is that, look, Shohei Ohtani is the best thing to happen to baseball in a long, long time. Maybe the best player ever in history. I just want to mention Stephen A. Smith again. A couple years ago, Shohei Ohtani, speaking through an interpreter, Stephen A. Smith was just racist as hell in how he said, baseball, this is your guy who you're trying to sell baseball to. This is why baseball's a loser. It was like, hey, lighten up. This guy's the greatest thing to happen to baseball from a batting perspective, from a pitching perspective. He does everything. And now he's the highest paid baseball player ever. So, Stephen A., eat it. Eat it. I'm telling you, these guys on Sports Talk, they don't know anything. But, they grouse a lot. They talk stuff, but they know nothing. And Stephen A. has not groveled sufficiently over his initial lack of respect for Shohei Ohtani a couple years ago. The guy is a baseball god, Shohei Ohtani. And unfortunately, he's going to be playing for the LA Dodgers. So, and unfortunately, the San Francisco Giants are going to see him probably like 14 games a year, 14, 15, 16. I mean, it's like ungodly the number of games the Giants and Dodgers will play. And the Dodgers will have Shohei and Mookie Betts and Freeman, and they'll have all their great players. And the Giants will have nobody. The Giants will look very maliit. Maliit. Oh, maliit. Okay. One last thing. I want to say something about Ryan O'Neal. Ryan O'Neal. What a career he had. You know, I know. I mean, he's not exactly like. Is he Jimmy Stewart of his generation? I don't know. I don't think he's Jimmy Stewart. But, I mean, you look at his career. All right, Barry Lyndon was a stinker. What's Up, Doc? Yeah, Barbara Streisand. I mean, Farrah Fawcett. He was with Farrah Fawcett now. Farrah Fawcett, poster child of a generation. But, you know, he had me at Love Story, 1970. I like Love Story. I watched it again a number of times within the last couple of years because in my play I talk about Love Story. In my play, Emil, Amok, Lost NPR host, I talk about it because it was for its time in 1970. It was honest, much more honest than people realize. It was witty. Ally McGraw playing Jenny Cavallari. Ryan O'Neal playing Oliver Barrett the fourth. My favorite scene, Jenny Cavallari, the scion of a cookie shop operator in Cranston, Rhode Island, working in the library, falls in love with Preppy, Ryan O'Neal, Oliver Barrett the fourth. They meet in the library, fall in love. He takes her home to meet Boston Brahmin dad, Ray Milland, Oliver Barrett III. Very icy. Very icy, does not end well. It's like a bunch of quick cuts and they're in, and as soon as they're in the dining room, they're out. And they're in this roadster, a convertible, right-hand drive. Ryan O'Neal's driving. And he says, Jenny, I don't know how you can look at me and not hate me, which I thought was very self-aware in 1970, which when you think about it, you know, there's Black Panthers, civil rights movement. He's saying, look, I'm the image of the patriarchy. I'm the son of a real bastard patriarch, but I represent that. How can you not look at me and not hate me? And Jenny Cavallari, Ally McGraw, looks at him and says, Ollie, I love your Roman numerals. I love everything about you. I just don't know how you can look at me and love me. I think you love me, not for me. You love me for my negative social status. So much self-awareness there in that movie. 1970s. And I thought to myself when I saw that, oh, that's why I didn't get laid at Harvard. I couldn't find someone who loved my negative social status. Oh, that was the reason. I thought it's because they thought I looked ugly or something. That's why I love that movie, Love Story. Because that, I mean, I won't spoil it for you. If you haven't seen it yet, if you're a member of the younger generation, you don't know how it ends. Well, there are some romps in the snow, but don't be fooled by romps in the snow. I just think that movie was far better than the notices it received. You know, love means never having to say you're sorry. So I enjoyed Love Story. Ryan O'Neal left his mark on American culture with that movie. Ever since Love Story, they'll go back to, it was always the first thing that captured our sense, right? Not the subsequent times. I mean, I don't think I saw him in subsequent things that made me say, yeah, Ryan O'Neal. Yeah, I like him. It was more like, yeah, Ryan O'Neal, love story. That was all. And then and this is always the case. You just want to capture that moment and say, that's the guy I like. Yes. And same with Ally McGraw. Ally McGraw, who, I mean, some people in her prime, people considered her the most beautiful woman in the world. She was beautiful, but most beautiful in the world? Jenny Cavallari, Ally McGraw? Well, anyway, Ryan O'Neal. He's gone and not forgotten. I mean, he will live on, right? I mean, he'll live on in moviedom. You can rent his movies and see what he was all about. I mean, that's the beauty, right? The magic is still there. And found out I was reading an appreciation in the New York Times that he was a boxer. Didn't know that. He was a boxer. Ryan O'Neal. And it's just Ryan O'Neal. So we begin with an obit, we end with an obit appreciation. Ryan O'Neal. Maria Martin. She told Latino stories. You know, if you're in the ethnic media, I guess that's the best that can be said. You know, she told stories that reflected her culture. She told stories on Latino USA, on NPR. She broke the barrier. She said, I have to tell these stories. These are stories of my people. And I'm just so sad that I didn't get another chance to see Maria before she left us. 72. 72. God. Still young. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific live. Catch us on the replay on YouTube, Emil 1. That's kind of the preferable place to find us, Emil 1. Catch us on Facebook, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. Also on Twitter, Emil Amok. If you still are using Twitter, amok.com is a way to email me and get in touch with me and see some older things. And so, we like to end with a little meditation. Just a little meditation. Loving kindness. You got to love yourself first before you send it out there. So like putting on that mask in the airport, or you're in the airplane. Put the mask on first, right? And then let your kid breathe. Now, I guess if your kid's turning purple, maybe then you can put the mask on him while you're trying to put, or her, and then you get your mask on. But I'm just saying, they say put your mask on first and then help your kid before he turns purple. So the way loving kindness works, love yourself, send the love out toward others. It works. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Kita.